Chapter 71. The Sixth Evolution 3. The Sixth Evolution 3. Eating the Dullahan's body took seconds. Now that it was no longer resisting my will to devour it, my black smoke made quick work of the boss's body. Predation of the Dullahan 1/1. Strength increased by 2. Magic increased by 3. Intermediate Black Mine became LV10 and has evolved into Advanced Black Mine. Black Mine's duration has greatly improved, and now larger-scale Black Mines can be created. I would never have imagined reaching this level of skill before. It filled me with a sense of achievement at acquiring another advanced skill. I even had my surprise skill reach the top level, yet now, it's still not enough. I'm only level 119. In terms of level, there were no doubt countless people who were stronger than me. But in terms of skill, I certainly had a bit of an advantage. I still haven't become the strongest just because I had a few high-level and special skills, though. The fact that I was accumulating a lot of advanced skills was not enough to relieve me. Instead, it only sparked my desire to keep growing stronger. Lee Chanyu's face came to mind, and I shook my head to clear these thoughts. No, I can't be satisfied with what I have achieved so far, but I can't deny my own growth. I went ahead and tested the Black Mine skill, confirming it had indeed gotten stronger. The change in power I could feel every time my skills grew was amazing, especially when it came to my magic skills. Although I wasn't sure if this skill counted as magic. It didn't feel quite the same. Doesn't really matter, I suppose. It didn't matter how high a level my detection was. There was a limit to what it could analyze. I decided to go ahead and check out the loot I had acquired. Yultana's helmet, 297/520. Defense 320. Unique rarity. Defense is increased by an additional 50% against magic attacks and undead. This was an excellent magic item with incredible defense. It didn't look like the dull helmet the Dullahan wore, though. Instead, it was made of some sort of dark metal. It felt a bit weird wearing it, as the helmet covered my mouth. I won't be able to eat like this. The problem presented itself immediately as I tried it on. I suppose I could just use the smoke to continue eating, but it just feels better if I bite into it myself. For Pelcadia's jewel, there were 4 colors of jewels. Red, blue, black, and purple. What do the colors mean? Do I take more than one? I thought about it for a bit, but decided to move on to the next piece of loot. I didn't have enough information to decide yet. The other thing I had acquired was the fortune egg, from killing the horse that the Dullahan had been riding. This is weird though. I mean, a horse doesn't lay eggs. I opened up my inventory and examined the item. My questions immediately answered. Fortune egg, 300/300. Unique rarity. A crystal possessing some of the essences of the world. A small life beats within it, waiting to hatch. It looked like a polished obsidian crystal, not at all in the shape of an egg. A group of white lights emitted from the center of the crystal, pulsing periodically. I went ahead and put it back into my inventory, now looking forward to what might hatch from the egg. I'll have to ask Rain for advice. I looked at the place where the Dullahan had dropped, a small wooden box in its place now. Might as well grab the floor reward too. The box had an ancient-grade weapon composite scroll in it, but I couldn't use it. Maybe I should go buy some more weapons so I can use this scroll. I considered heading back to the store, but a quick look into my inventory informed me that I didn't have enough money left to pursue that idea. Maybe I can collect some materials and make my own weapons? It was probably best that I don't rely on the store too much. Reflecting on this, I stood up. Before that, it was time to take the final steps toward my next evolution. Fate, what do you think of the soul? Asked, meeting my gaze. I felt a strange sense of déjà vu. Wasn't that something Rain had asked me before? I think I had concluded that it wasn't possible to know the soul, and Rain had seemed satisfied with my answer. I thought of that answer after my training in the Garden of Nak, so I was confident in it. No answer. I'm still thinking. Now that I considered it again, things were a bit different. I thought of the monsters in the rookie's battlefield, formed by the souls of Earthlings who lost their bodies in the Great Fusion. They successfully invaded the battlefield with only their will to survive and even acquired a physical form. They even learned to extinguish the flames of other souls. Fighting them completely changed my perspective. I had thought that the soul was still inviolable, and while I still agreed with that to a point, I didn't think it was enough to describe it with only that one word. There were so many possibilities hidden within a soul. It wasn't just software designed to move the hardware that was the body. It's too hard for me to say. There's too many possibilities to describe it in one word. Well, don't worry too much about it. My anguished thoughts were immediately dismissed by A's laughter. There's nothing in this universe that could define a soul. If someone could, they would be a creator. You asked me a question with no answer? I asked what you, fate, think about the soul. For me, it is something that you cannot hold more than one of, no matter how much you covet it. But for you, it must be different. A flash of lightning struck through me, the path ahead of me becoming crystal clear. I now knew what the task on the third floor of Jinma's tower was. Are you telling me to devour your soul? Yes. I instinctively wanted to reject it, laughing it off. I had been killing and devouring others so I could survive up until now, unaware of the soul. But, as I considered it, was eating a soul really that different from eating just flesh? And, ultimately, if it meant surviving, wasn't I prepared to do anything with these two hands of mine? No matter the cost, no matter how heinous it was, I don't think it will be possible for you to devour a soul. I believe it is impossible for you now. Then, have you ever noticed the soul of the monsters you have devoured? No. That is because the soul disappears the moment its life is cut down. Whether it is extinguished or perhaps reborn or simply flows off to another realm, I do not know. But no one should interfere with the soul after death. What about undead? Did undead even have a soul? The zombies weren't intelligent, they could only moan, but the ghouls had acted with some level of intelligence. Then there was also the Dullahan, who could talk and was fully sentient as far as I could tell. They are merely dead bodies, moved forward by the energy of death without a soul. Memories remain in the body, forming a type of consciousness, but it isn't permanent. However, if the soul were undead, that would be a different story. Whether or not it possesses a body, those who have undead souls are terrible things. Vile creatures that have violated taboos and became undead of their own will. Then, what I will have to face are undead souls. As he said it, the Colosseum soared around us. The walls were made of stacked translucent blocks, forming on all sides around us. A soul that remains on earth without surrendering to death is longer a pure soul. It is mutated, degenerated. But it also becomes possible for us to recognize it. It is no longer an unknown object, so as long as you are able to handle your own power, you have no need to fear. I wasn't able to recognize the soul as I could see the energy of magic and stamina, or of life and death. The souls I had been able to see, the monsters on the rookie's battlefield, were caused by a mutation. It didn't sound like the undead I talked about was exactly the same as them, but they seemed similar. Only, souls that have fallen and are now the same as flesh have the same ending as that of flesh. Now, do you know how you should recognize the soul? Kind of. Thanks for the complicated explanation. HM. His face was briefly distorted as a translucent wall separated us, and I wondered if L had met with A as well as Rain. Maybe she left me a message here as well? I shook the thought out of my head and thanked A. Hazy spirits began to spring up across the Colosseum. I could already tell they were different than the monsters on the rookie's battlefield. Those monsters had been formed by mutations caused by death, but these were souls that should have died, and mutated due to their refusal of death. Now, I needed to learn how to deal with them in the same way I had the others. Can you eat them? Yes. Thousands, tens of thousands, of souls began to flock toward me, attempting to overwhelm me. I instinctively reached out, pulling down the demon's claw to both hands. Even if I can't eat them, as long as I can kill them. The third floor of Jinma's tower. Your adversaries are these corpses. The floor will be completed when all enemies have been predated. Fuck. I guess Jinma's tower wouldn't be easy after all. Chapter 72. The Sixth Evolution, 4. The Sixth Evolution, 4. I don't want to die. Death is so cold. Why are you trying to kill us? You are still alive. Leave us be. The corrupted souls, undead of the soul but not of the flesh, did not have powerful physical attacks like the monsters on the rookie's battlefield. Instead, they had strong magic that tried to penetrate my mind. It wasn't enough to faze me, however. I had been developing the strength of my soul with L's help. Not that I'm sure how to eat them yet. I couldn't just kill them. So instead of a weapon, I shaped the demon's claw into a thin shield to protect myself. You're exposing your soul. Kakik. Lower the shield and lend me your body. It's an elf's body. It'll be mine. I already figured it out. I could assimilate Demon's Claw into Blood Shadow to slay the monsters before. So why couldn't I imbue the black smoke from my Predation skill into the Demon's Claw? Shouldn't my Demon's Claw be enough? Well, easier said than done. Just because I know what I need to do doesn't mean I know how. The idea was simple enough at its base, and I thought it should be possible. A huge explosion went through my head, feeling as if someone lit fireworks inside my mind. My heart pounded wildly as if it were readying to burst free from my chest. My body, my soul, my abilities, my predation, my heart. Thoughts of all the things I could or couldn't do, thoughts of my future, overwhelmed my mind and then, just as quickly, flowed out. A vision of the future, or just a moment's delusion. It didn't matter, nor did it matter that I couldn't think of even half the things that had just been running through my mind. What I could hold on to had little meaning to me anyways. It didn't matter. I would never forget this moment. This was the time that everything would start to change. I felt like I had been able to put my feet on firm ground for the first time. My demon's claw morphed, capturing that idea of predation only able to manifest in the flesh before, and expressing it now as a form of my soul. It stretched out to the limit of my body, encompassing all I had learned in my dealings with matters of the soul. The enemy was quick to realize what had happened. The mutated souls were sensitive to my change in appearance and power. Well, it's to be expected they're sensitive to changes in a soul. It's wriggling. Run away or be eaten. I'll die. The demon's claws rose up to both of my shoulders, now long tendrils like those from the monsters in the rookie's battlefield. The undead attempted to flee to avoid me but couldn't escape the Colosseum. Such a short distance meant nothing to me in this space. Let's finish this fast. I observed the undead who had been flocking to me, aiming to attack my soul fleeing to the Colosseum's edge. Using ubiquitous to jump into the middle of them, I was buried amongst these spirits, surrounded by malice and evil energy. But I had no worries. Ag. I'm scared. Don't. I don't want to die. The demon's claw wrapped around me like a snake, tendrils of gloomy gray energy expanding out to wrap around the undead. It was already over for them. They couldn't run away. The only fate that awaited them was to be devoured by my power of predation. Magic has increased by 1. Predation became LV6. Predation has become more efficient. I could feel the power they had acquired by becoming undead souls flowing into me. I could feel it, as the one who was devouring them, that they were being completely destroyed by this. I wouldn't be able to capture their souls, any chance of that lost. I felt a brief flash of guilt, but it was gone as soon as it had arrived. I won't stop here. I have much more to devour. If I wanted to grow stronger, I couldn't let this stop me. I had to look ahead and keep pushing forward. No matter the value of a soul, I couldn't compare it to my own life. Ag. My soul, my power, took me only 7 minutes and 30 seconds to conquer the 3rd floor of Jinma's tower. For the first time since I had entered, I was able to conquer the tower without dying. Conquer the 3rd floor of Jinma's tower 1/1. Quest completed. You have earned 24,810,000 experience. You have received 13,000 gold. Level up. You have obtained 25 air bombs. You have obtained 3 vitality potions. You may now evolve. The Colosseum faded around me, replaced by a smiling who watched me as I retracted the demon's claw. Have you put on a little weight? Don't joke. I'm tired. I retorted, pulling up the evolution notification window. Please select a race to evolve into. 1. Crimson Elf Bloodwalker. 2. Crimson Elf Shadow Runner. 3. Crimson Elf Taker. The first of the three specialized in weapons and armor, the second in using artifacts. The third seemed to be related to my abilities that I had been perfecting through the rookie's battlefield, and this floor of Jinma's tower. I wasn't sure which to pick, but I figured I could grow stronger without any issues regardless of which one I chose. Which meant it didn't matter which one I picked. I quickly picked one, looking at A, who was watching me with blank eyes. I may look different in a moment, but it's still me. I told him quickly before the pain of evolution overtook me. Quest. As you grow in strength, others around you are growing stronger as well. Your allies are few and your enemies many. Life belongs to those who take it. The moment one story ends, a new one will begin. Run through the dungeon faster than anyone else. Predation of monsters in the 5th floor of the Black Palace District 70/150,000. Predation of high-ranking species in Black Palace District 75F0/500. Predation of a giant troll 0-1. Conquest of the 4th floor of Jinma's Tower 0-1. Garden of Nak's 3rd game 10-1. After I had finished evolving, I waved goodbye to A and opened the door to the store. Stepping through, Rain was wiping down a glass with a dry cloth as always. No sign of L. You're back, Fate. Oh my. You've grown quite a bit again, haven't you? Is that so? As I evolved this time, I had assumed my appearance wouldn't change that much, but Rain's reaction indicated otherwise. I think it's your eyes more than anything. Eyes like a man possessed, with a firm goal in mind that can't be shaken. Much different than my dead eyes. You look pretty cool, Fate. I felt a bit embarrassed by Rain's praise, even more so because he was self-deprecating. I opened my question to respond but stopped myself short. I wasn't sure how I should approach this, given how delicate the subject I wanted to broach was. So, instead of talking about it, I took an item out of my inventory and displayed it to Rain. Could you check this out for me, Rain? I produced the egg I had acquired. A fortune egg. I've only seen one of these once before. It's an item that I don't sell here too. It must have been rare indeed then. Rain wasn't an elf, and I could only guess at how long his lifespan was. I knew it hadn't been short, and yet, he had only seen something like this twice. Even better, it's not an item he is able to sell here. Up until now I thought I could buy anything here as long as I had the money. There's no knowing what sort of creature may hatch out of this egg or how to get it to hatch in the first place. I know just one thing. It is said the luck of the person holding it is said to influence it. That's why it has the name of fortune egg. Ah, luck. Was that the one ability in my status that was still a mystery? I hadn't thought about it lately because I couldn't figure it out by myself, and I didn't want to ask anyone. But maybe I acquired a fortune egg because I have high luck? I can tell it has already started to resonate with you, Fate. Can you feel it? Huh? Now that you mention it. The light pulsated within the egg in tune with my own heartbeat. Furthermore, it felt like it was drawing my gaze to it, slowly sucking me in. Please be patient. This egg will be affected by you. Your magic, your soul, your will. All of them will help this egg hatch. You're involved with this creature now. Rain's look lingered upon the egg before he handed it back to me. A look almost like that of a doting parent. If your future is not clear, it will influence this egg. However, the trajectory you are on will lead you to great things. Although you don't need me to tell you that. I accepted the egg and brought it to my chest, feeling a sense of burden and confidence blooming inside me in equal measure. My future. The path I would take. A path no one else could walk. I put the egg back into my inventory and turned around, heading back deep into the Black Palace. And so, time continued to pass. I could not count how much time had passed by the watch's hand, though Mirena told me an entire year had passed since the Great Fusion. Rain was still kind and gentle, still polishing the glasses and pouring out alcohol. As I needed to return to him for advice less and less, I felt like our relationship continued to deepen. At first, I had felt like he was a dependable older brother, and I a snot-nosed younger sibling. But now I felt as if we were drinking buddies. A's blunt remarks never softened, but I realized it was his way of caring for my well-being, even if he did offend me once in a while. He had lived lifetimes more than I had, but he was much more awkward around people. I made a point to keep that to myself, fearing retaliation. Elle was much the same. No matter how much my appearance changed, she still recognized me by the appearance of my soul. Her presence wore at my mind at the same time it refreshed me. She had been working on building up my interior, and now she was focusing more on working on the external aspects of the soul. Now I was on the 7th floor of the Black Palace District 7. Captain, a voice rang out in my head, causing me to snap to attention. I was in the midst of a battle with higher-level advanced monsters, but my combined skills of surprise and fairy tale were enough to ensure my safety even here. I'm here. What's going on? Reaching out with the highest level of detection I could manage, I felt some sort of abnormality out in the dungeon. What we were worried about is happening. Only, what is? I already had a feeling of what was happening, but I wanted more time to prepare before the world's attention turned toward me. The guild is coming, with the intent of killing the dungeon elves. I let out a sigh as I swung my great sword down, cleaving off the neck of an ogre that tried its best to hold me back. Blood splattered on my sword and clothing, the body of the ogre unable to hit the ground before the black smoke consumed it without a trace. You have gained 3,850,918 experience. You have received 12 gold and 38 silver. I'm on my way now. I started sprinting down the dungeon passages, on my way to a war with these humans. Chapter 73. The War Between Humans and Elves, 1. The War Between Humans and Elves, 1. This was not the first time we had battled for the guilds. We crushed one called the Phoenix Hunters, and Li Chanyu defeated a raid from a group called the Future Makers while I was on the 6th floor. However, what was shocking was how they attacked Li Chanyu, who had been masquerading as a human at the time. They tried to kill him without any hesitation, not because they saw through him but because they wanted to be the first to conquer the dungeon. It sickened me to think about how far humans and their society had fallen. When I thought about it, I suppose that fighting them in the first place had just been the catalyst needed for them to commit more resources. The Phoenix Hunters had been wiped out entirely, but the Future Makers had been continuously leading large raids. By my count, they probably brought in at least 200 combatants into the dungeon. The fact that this dungeon was difficult, and that they had an encounter with an enemy that wasn't a monster, these things couldn't be concealed any further. The fact that the Black Palace was no ordinary dungeon must be spreading like wildfire out in the world. This didn't mean the Black Palace was packed to the brim with challengers, however. Most of the Future Makers died with dignity within the dungeon, except for one. The one I saved, of course. I had been convinced that it would be best to leave one alive instead of killing them all. I had been hoping he would dissuade others from showing up, and it had worked until now. I had no idea what he had been saying out there, but it was enough to stop the weaklings from showing up, and it even gave the stronger ones caution. But it seemed that happened was that it motivated those humans to group up, deciding it would be less risky and more profitable if they did. That had given us some time, at least, but the result was that they had collected enough people to attack the Black Palace while I was clearing the 7th floor. This place I know better than anyone else now. The 1st floor was bustling with activity, people running back and forth down the passageways and fighting against the monsters within. They would have to keep that up until they found the key to the boss room. It was the path they had to take to advance to the next floor. Li Chanyu, you're already here? He stopped in his tracks, turning to me in amazement as I placed a hand on his shoulder. I had caught up with him on the 3rd floor. He was even more surprised as he looked at me. Captain, you've changed again? A bit, but not as much as before. After all, I was still a Crimson Elf even though I continued to evolve as I passed through the 5th and 6th floors. The titles were becoming more grandiose and impressive sounding, but I am still a Crimson Elf, nevertheless. I was expecting that my next evolution would be different once I finally conquered this dungeon. The quest, more difficult than ever, supported this idea of mine. You look way stronger than me. Of course I am. Listen, you. Li Chanyu had also gotten stronger, now possessing the name of Beast Lord after evolving from Werewolf Beast Commander. He was still a medium-level monster, a werewolf. But the fact he evolved twice meant he was a rare high-level species that could compete with other advanced monsters. His hellhounds that also evolved made him even more of a threat. I'll go ahead. Let's stick to the plan. Leave it to me. I nodded at Lee Chanyu before speeding down the corridor. I needed to get down to the first floor before they breach into the second, although it might be tricky to do so. The structure of the Black Palace expanded at higher levels, and it was a known tactical fact that a small space was more advantageous for a small force to fight in against a larger one. While I would probably be fine, I had to stop them in the small spaces for Lee Chanyu's safety. With that in mind, I sprinted at full speed through the dungeon. I had no run-ins with monsters, knowing that there were none on this level or the next two that could stop me or even sense my presence. I was moving fast enough that even if they tried to do something, they wouldn't be able to keep up with me. This body specialized in agility over strength, after all. And while the evolutions had increased my strength greatly, it was still nothing compared to my growth in agility. There was nothing here that could keep up with me now. I'm here. From when I first heard from Lee Chanyu to now, standing on the first floor, only about an hour and a half had passed. No time to pat myself on the back, though. I raised my surprise and fairy tale skill to the max, letting my senses reach throughout the whole first floor. I could tell a large amount of undead had already been cleared out, and an even larger group of humans was sweeping through the dungeon. 570 total? Looks like most of them aren't even level 70. But they have some stronger than level 100. A truly staggering amount of them had already entered, but that wasn't all of them. I could tell large groups of them were still flowing in, and it felt like the guild's master hadn't even arrived yet. They might be waiting outside for a report, conserving their strength. Maybe they're waiting for me to show up. It seemed so funny to me that the strongest of the guild would throw all these weaker people in first to protect themselves. But I had to thank them for it. It gave me plenty of room to move around in without issue. These were people who had entered this dungeon with the only goal of eradicating the elves. My goal was the same: annihilation, pure and simple. My first goal was to take out the 17 stronger members that were standing outside the boss room. They each appeared to be elites with a level over 100, probably the top representatives from each of the guilds here. My feet landed gently on the floor, the face of the warrior holding a shield up only a hair's width away from me. I closed the distance instantly, and I could see the realization dawning on his face too late. I had already grabbed him by the neck before he could turn that realization into reaction, crushing it quickly without mercy. You have gained 273,003 experience. You have received 298 gold, 19 silver, and 33 bronze. You have acquired the items in the opponent's inventory, which include... I gave no mind to the notification window that popped up, immediately using Lunatic Trickster. 16 abilities fired out a moment later, blocked by the huge trap I set as I stepped away. It took them a second to realize one of their comrades was dead. I had moved too quickly for their eyes to keep up. By the time they realized what had happened, the guard had already been devoured by black smoke. That confusion didn't last long. However, as a warrior that appeared to be from the same guild opened his mouth to yell, "Dash!" No sound came out of his mouth, a stupid expression on his face as he stood there slack-jawed in confusion. The other guild members realized they were in the same boat as well, no sound leaving their mouths as they tried to speak. That was the power of my Lunatic Trickster. I set off a trap that would absorb the sound in that space. As my stamina and magic increased, so too did the power and diversity of Lunatic Trickster. This one was particularly useful for stealth assaults. I moved forward again, a flash of black lightning piercing through the heart of one of the frightened warriors who was trying to escape the trap. I followed the movement through, pushing on to the wizard, holding a staff next to him. He couldn't resist as I pulled his head toward me and snapped it, manifesting my demon's claws as tendrils to stab through 3 others. One of them pulled their greatsword and swung at me, a long blade of dark mana burning inside it. The remaining humans were organizing quickly to fight me. Not enough. The battle was quick and quiet. The power these warriors had in life wasn't small, all of them stronger than level 100. Unfortunately, they weren't prepared for my ambush. As an assassin, I had to rely on was my speed and stealth, and I wasn't willing to give my opponents a chance to show off their strength. I faced them dispassionately with my mind calm. My predation skill swept over them, swallowing the bodies at once. I was quick to leave the area once the last of the remains were consumed by black smoke. I looked through my inventory as I moved, thinking about how I could use the items I just acquired to set a trap. My inventory had grown again with my evolution, now boasting a total of 81 slots. Not that it's nearly enough to hold loot from hundreds of humans. I decided it would be best to consume the junk first, then deal with the good items later. How long is it until the next hunt? How about asking the master if you can test some of this treasure? Don't be stupid. This is a dungeon that Future Maker is going to conquer. Only, the members of the Guild Alliance were at full attention, maintaining strict boundaries as they patrolled the dungeon. I was on alert for a moment where I could strike. It may have been idiotic, but the strongest of them would have to come to deal with me if I made my presence known. I swung my sword at a corridor as I passed by, collapsing the passageway and burying at least 10 of the warriors. I set off an explosive trap in the middle of another corridor, setting dozens of humans aflame as I consumed the items I acquired to fuel my magic. He's here. He's not alone. Stay alert. A bloody laugh escaped me as my feet carried me through the dungeon. It was so funny I could barely stand it. They still thought I was an entire group and not just one man. Let's begin. I apologized mentally to Li Chanyu, who was waiting ahead. He might not get his turn to fight. I let my mana flow out of me, more than half of it, to summon an intense flame in the middle of the room I was in. It flared outward, flowing through the first floor of the dungeon and consuming the humans inside. Arg! Fuck! With a bang, I announced the start of the war between humans and elves. Chapter 74. The War Between Human and Elves, 2. The War Between Human and Elves, 2. I found him. Catch him. Screams of pain and confusion filled the corridors of the first floor, intermingling with the yelling of orders as the officers of the guilds attempted to restore some sense of order. There were no monsters here to be found, the only inhabitants of this floor being myself and my prey. Bind! Damn it, he's too fast. Magic wasn't an easy thing to avoid. Most spells immediately activate upon the target as soon as they are cast. But if you could detect the magic beforehand and specify where the location it would hit it wasn't so difficult to avoid, especially if the caster was someone of a much lower level than you. Is it the elves? I haven't seen any yet. Get out there. You gained 329,183 experience. You received 192 gold and 83 silver. You have acquired the items in the opponent's inventory, which include, there's more than one of them. They can appear anywhere. Stay alert. They're a high-level class. Even when overwhelmed by a much stronger force, humans still had the capacity to band together and fight back. With enough planning and preparation, nothing was impossible. You have gained 484,029 experience. You have received 1,742 gold. However, in the midst of this chaos where their lives were in imminent danger, it was nearly impossible for the guilds to maintain order. The humans here were panicking, beginning to split up in an attempt to protect their own lives. I don't want to die like this. We just have to hold on until the rest come in. We won't be able to. You have gained. As the groups slowly began to dissolve into individuals, the confusion continued to rise. The ugly side of the humans was about to surface, their will to survive at any cost arising. Bind! There he is. It's an elf. A real elf. I appeared before them, my illusionary item making me appear as an elf with pure white skin and a different face. Kill it now. Countless attacks flew toward me, both magic and weapons heading right toward me. An explosion flooded the corridor, catching several of the humans in the blast. The others didn't care, though. It's not like they knew all their guild members. And as long as the attack took out the enemy, what were a few casualties? In fact, whoever caused the explosion would probably receive a promotion for finishing off the enemy. Is it dead? Experience. Whoever just received experience and gold. Tell me. The reality was that I was never caught in the explosion, only my alter ego after I had jumped using ubiquitous. My alter ego, combined with my top-notch confusion skill, was enough to deceive them. As the smoke cleared, all that was there were the bodies of their fallen comrades. Who killed it? There isn't a body. It's not over yet. Everyone, ready yourselves. I shifted my form to match my surroundings, readying the shining blade of my greatsword as I approached. The sword I held shone with an ugly light, filled with my mana. The light faded as the mana in the sword expended itself, taking out my enemies before they could register what was happening. Again, I jumped away with ubiquitous. A group of them had escaped to the entrance of a narrow passage where guild officers were attempting to maintain order. I was right under their noses now, but they had no clue. It is almost too easy to deceive their senses. Their failure to cultivate their own strength would only result in death. A death that was heading for them sooner than they might like. I inhaled as I bent to the floor, rocketing forward like a sprinter without a moment's hesitation. I combined power attack, speed attack, and several of my other high-end skills to activate my Devil's Fang. Oh! The human leading the others noticed the abnormal flow of mana too late. His body was cut in half at the waist by my greatsword before he could even let out a warning. You have gained. Oh! That was only the start as I cut through the rest of the group with reckless abandon. The walls of the passageway, metal armor, human flesh, and bone, none of them posed any resistance to my blade as I rushed forward. There to the west. Stop them! The bodies of the humans lying in the passage began to rise into the air, carried by my black smoke that was hungrily devouring them. Some of those toward the end of the passage had seen the attack and were attempting to flee, but I only had to look at them to trigger a trap to prevent their movement. Lunatic Trickster's activation speed, now that it had reached an advanced level, was functionally 0 so long as I provided materials for it. Ag! This monster! I put power into my legs, closing the distance between us in seconds. By the time I reached the end of the passage, the dozens of humans who filled the passage were already gone without a trace. Fuck! He's stronger than the dead. There's a magic trap here. Humanity. That was the group I had once belonged to. There were those who would always try to stand out but would be buried by the group. There were also those who would do anything, even the cruelest of acts if it meant protecting humanity. As I contemplated this, I stepped forward using half of my mana to burn through the hallways with my flame magic. A wizard was attempting to stop my flames but couldn't prevent me from grabbing his neck and breaking it. Nor could his allies stop me from cleaving through them with my sword. We've lost contact with the people in the other passageway. Go check it out. I laughed as I appeared in front of a guild officer, brandishing my sword that emitted an odd light once more. There are too many of us for you to handle. My sword cleaved through, the head of the officer sailing through the air. His face was stuck in an expression of terror, very fitting as the black smoke consumed it whole. 120 left. As expected, it really is an elf. Don't call me an elf, we're rookies. I leaped again, letting out a battle cry for all those near to hear. I was too fast for them to catch up and too strong for them to resist. Ack! I thought elves weren't hostile? It was so funny to me that I couldn't help but laugh. One after another, the heads of these humans were flying through the air. I had let go of my tactic of surprise and confusion, striding through the humans with confidence. Well, that's just a little misunderstanding, and I have to admit my curiosity about the items I can acquire by killing all of you. My demon's claws protruded from my shoulders, tendrils stretching out in all directions. It didn't matter what sort of armor they encountered. The tendrils bit through them with ease to reach the weak souls hidden within. They only continued to grow as they devoured. If you wanted to stop us, why would you put up such a weak guard at the entrance? Get him! These humans didn't know of the existence of the rookie's battlefield, which was a secret well kept by the elves. They believed that there were more elves further in the dungeon, and if they killed me, I wouldn't alert the others. What foolishness! Had I been a real elf, I would have just returned to the rookie's battlefield after I fought with the guilds here. He's too strong. It can't be. Is he over level 200? Even if all elves are, we can beat them. Humans relied on reason and logic, but at moments like these, they became impulsive and cruel. Countless humans had already lost their lives here today, throwing the remaining ones into despair. There was only one human here who I would allow to survive, the one who had concealed himself the best among all those here. I had gone by him several times but decided to leave him be. They were running away now, believing that their skill had been enough to save them. I needed him to run outside and alert those waiting out there that I was here. I decided to stop playing with my food, jumping forward with ubiquitous and slashed through the necks of those in front of me. My mana exploded out the humans around me, falling with ease. Weak, too weak. A warrior holding an axe jumped at me as soon as I appeared with ubiquitous, having been waiting for me to appear to kill me. His attack was fueled with mana, the axe blade glowing blue. It looked like there were those in this group who would endanger their own lives for others. I considered this as I jumped away from the warrior with ubiquitous. Well, not that it matters. Black lightning erupted from my sword, exploding through all the nearby warriors. I stepped forward and reprieved them of their heads as they lay collapsed on the floor. Now only 3 remained. Please, spare me. A young woman threw her sword on the ground and knelt, begging for her life. The other 2 with her quickly joined in pleading. I could tell that more enemies had just entered the first floor. Only, how many are there? Say 74. We thought you would be further in the dungeon. 74 people. Please spare me. I fired off a black rose, piercing through the woman's neck and killing her instantly. The others tried to stand up and flee but only made 1 step before meeting the same fate. I could hear the sound of footsteps growing louder, troops in battle formation marching through the dungeon. The traces of battle remain, but there are no bodies. Any survivors? We need to hurry. Don't be too hasty. We were expecting the enemy to be strong. Today will be the day that humans will surpass the elves. I could hear a powerful voice, dripping with confidence. The sound of a person in charge. The most delicious prey here has arrived. I hit the floor running, readying more traps, and pulling out my sword once more. Chapter 75. The War Between Humans and Elves. 3 End of Volume 3. The War Between Humans and Elves. 3 End of Volume 3. As the woman said, a total of 74 people entered the dungeon. The one who I allowed to escape earlier wasn't among their numbers. Must have abandoned his guild and bailed so he could live. I wasn't particularly surprised that had been the case, and I suppose it was a better outcome. This way, the story would spread once, the tale growing more terrible with each telling. A small, but potentially fatal distrust between humans and elves growing. Not that it would be a bad thing for humanity as a whole. Although many would die here in this dungeon, it would make it clear to the rest that elves were an enemy of the human race. Thus, humans would be warier of them in the future. Given the elves' prior actions, that wouldn't be a bad thing for humanity's survival. I wasn't on the human side, however. It was just that both the elves and the humans were currently my enemies, and by pitting them together, I could consume them more effectively. If all elves were like Morena, this wouldn't be necessary for me to do. If only Rain's hatred didn't extend so far. I shook these thoughts from my mind and kept running. I could consider this stuff later. Now, I needed to focus on ending this fight. I issued commands to leave a force on the first floor. Sir. I went straight for the head of the snake first, ambushing the guild master who was easily over level 160. He was covered from head to toe with metal armor, a large shield in hand, but his defenses were no match for my demon's claw that benefited from a top-level surprise. You have gained 750,132 experience. You have received 3,982 gold and 29 silver. You have acquired the items in the opponent's inventory, which includes the black smoke swallowed up his severed head before it could hit the ground. The rest of the body was a bit too strong to devour immediately, so I disappeared instead. It had taken such a short amount of time, the humans following the guild master stopped in their tracks. A cold silence overtook the group for just a brief moment before being shattered by the man who appeared to be the second in command. Form C. The guild troops immediately split up into groups, assembling into a formation that would fare better in the narrow spaces of the first floor. They were all silent as they moved, trying desperately to pinpoint my location with their own sensing skills. Or so I thought. Several wizards began to chant and raise their hands, releasing their mana. I could see weak magic spreading out over the area. They were trying to fill the entire area with mana so that they could sense where I was. It wouldn't matter how great my skills were. If I activated magic within their net, they would undoubtedly sense me. I jumped forward with ubiquitous. There! Several attacks flew past me and slammed into my alter ego, destroying it without a trace. At the same time, I sliced the neck of the closest wizard. Magic immediately began to well up below me from the ground, but I was able to narrowly avoid the attack using ubiquitous again. I hid myself using surprise and fairy tales, waiting for the magical bombardment to cease. How many are there? Don't scatter. Group up. They were much more prepared than the previous humans I wiped out, working in tandem to anticipate my next attack. But, observing them, I could tell that there were guild masters among them that were serving as the core of the guild alliance. No doubt, the troops would be in disarray if they were taken out. Master, our troops. We need to prepare for the worst. It didn't matter what they had to say or how they prepared. I brought my sword down again at the side of a warrior who left the group for just an instant. You have gained 530, 918. I brought my sword back to strike again, but I could feel a momentary point of resistance as it moved through the air. I barely had time to realize what had happened before the tiny trap set up, a burst of dazzling light pouring out around me. A lot of mana had been poured into it, enough to blind even a high-level monster. But it didn't affect me, who had resistances above the highest levels. Quick! The warriors rushed me, assuming I had lost my vision. I effortlessly slid past their attacks, piercing through one's neck with my sword. My demon's claws were flailing about, stabbing and cutting through them. You have gained. Fuck! Pull back! I thought additional magical attacks would be on their way, but they weren't. The faces of the humans around me were full of horror, hesitation filling them. If I fight back now, maybe I can get a hit in, but I might kill an ally. That was no doubt the thought going through them, the one I had been hoping for. It was good to see that my plan was working. Hey! Don't attack! Pull back quickly. Of course, I still needed to be careful of the enemy's counterattack. If one of them managed to clip me, they would use that to seize the advantage over me and keep the pressure on. I had been dominating the fight until now, but I was dancing on a razor's edge the entire time. If I wanted to instill my enemies with fear, my every move had to be perfectly coordinated. I was slowly chipping away at the enemies. The mass haunting on the 6th floor came to my mind, the swarms of advanced monsters. I wasn't confident that I could deal with them at the time, so I used surprise and fairy tales to the max. I was feeling that same sort of tension now. These enemies lacked the destructive power those advanced monsters had, but they had various unknown abilities and tactics they could rely on. I couldn't be too vigilant against them. I had to continue to hide from them, sliding my blade into the gaps they revealed, taking care not to fall into a trap along the way. This is fun. If you can't find him with detection, use your mana. Fuck. Are all elves monsters like this? There is a reason they hid away. Shit. What really differentiated humans from monsters was their ability to adapt to the situation, to consider the options, the risk versus benefits, and change tactics accordingly. Right now, this group was weighing the situation, considering what they could do to succeed where the much larger advance force had failed. I would continue to attack them, gaining ground inch by bloody inch and slowly digging away at their formation from the outside. But they were starting to catch on. Fuck. How many do we have left? We can't keep this up. The elves all look very similar. Has anyone killed one yet and gained experience? A stillness overcame the group, during which I claimed one more life. There's only one enemy. It was but a whisper, yet everyone here could hear it. They're using a skill to make it look like there are more of them, but there's only one. I sliced through one more, piercing through a wizard's neck with black lightning as they tried to retaliate. Black smoke consumed them whole. That was apparently enough to confirm it. We're going about this wrong. There is one person, not a group. They're probably not even an elf. A monster. It's a monster, not an elf. The scream rang out. It had taken them quite a while to reach the conclusion, but they had noticed it regardless. That was the skill of an elite group, after all. I felt like I should applaud them. It's too late now, though. I activated Lunatic Trickster, fueling it with the items I collected so far. Bang! The trap was a mixture of various metals, sparks, and ice, spreading out through the enclosed area. The humans close to it crumbled immediately, blood fountaining out and covering the warriors near those who took the brunt. I had just reduced their numbers to 44. Form F. The remaining guild master, the only one left, gave the command quietly. I had no way of knowing what it meant. We've failed. We shouldn't have come here. Fuck. The group began to collapse, trying to make their escape toward the dungeon entrance. Most of them were no doubt grateful that this battle had taken place on the first floor, and not further in. But that wouldn't do, especially not now that they had concluded their enemy wasn't an elf. That would make everything I had been doing up until now pointless. Kea! A hellhound? No, it's a high-level type. The group that had been fleeing moments prior came to a stop, weapons drawn against the hellhound now blocking the exit. Those in front were only able to advance a few steps forward before their next foe appeared. A massive troll appearing behind the group and lashing out. Gawea! This is only the first floor. What's with these high-level monsters? That wasn't the end of it, however. More intermediate and rare high-level monsters appeared one after another. Armored snakes, living armor, venomous ghouls, monsters that were strong even if they weren't advanced. This was what Li Chanyu had achieved in his time here, with the new power he gained as a beast lord. That monster wasn't alone? He must be the owner of this dungeon. Shit, we have to push through. It's too late. I murmured quietly. The monsters that Li Chanyu rallied had been waiting to strike until now when the humans were disorganized and attempting to flee. This was the moment I enjoyed the most. The chaos, the freedom. I leaped through space with Ubiquitous, lashing out with my sword and skills through the fleeing enemies. I laughed off the magic attacks of one of the remaining wizards, raising them to the ground with my flame magic. I snapped through a warrior's sword and pierced through his heart, momentarily surprised as he hugged onto me and brought me close. Quickly, the attack that hit me went through my defenses and exposed my bone. Hope flared back up in the eyes of the humans from this fatal wound they had dealt me. It lasted only briefly, as the black smoke absorbed the warrior's body and healed my wounds completely. The wizard who struck the blow lost strength, falling to his knees. This can't be. Goodbye. I decapitated them quickly, continuing to move forward through space with Ubiquitous. I wasn't able to be everywhere at once with Ubiquitous, but at least it let me control this space around me. Help! I heard a shout ring out. Less than 5 humans remained. I want to live, please save me. I'll never return. Please. I forced myself to stop laughing, watching as this man's comrades turned away from his pleas. His sorrow quickly turned to anger. God, why? This is stupid. I'm the leader who will bring our country to greatness. I can't die here. And like that, the F.A. Ade was dropped. This man, who was so relaxed and confident when there was no danger, was now like this when his life was threatened. No doubt, he had been enjoying the high life, living as a member of the upper echelons. No doubt, he used his power to put down people weaker than him as well and enjoyed it just as much as I was. He looked up to me with hope in his eyes, my hands lowered by my side, and my stance relaxed. He grabbed at my leg. Help me. Please, help me. I'll give you anything you want. Have you ever spared the life of someone who was begging you to? His expression instantly morphed. Now he was making an odd face, one I had never seen before. This man had thought himself superior to others and had valued his life as such. But now that idea was turning to ash before him. No? All right. My sword swung down, black smoke billowing out to absorb his body. You are no exception then. You have gained 817,293 experience. You have received 16,837 gold and 39 silver. You have acquired 3 random items from the opponent's inventory. Level up. Magic increased by 1. The humans left trembled with fear, dropping all resistance. They freely admitted they had taken up weapons to kill me and now accepted that they were to die. The war was over. This small war that took place in the 7th district of the Black Palace. It had been no more than a conflict between my desire to survive and these humans' desire for power. But it may yet be the fuse to light a bigger conflict. It didn't matter what would happen next. My goal was still clear in my mind. To survive, to get stronger. I survived today and I grew stronger, all by destroying the desires of others. No guilt came to me, however. It didn't matter whether my enemy was a monster, an elf, or a human. I left the first floor and reconvened with Li Chanyu, who was relieved that the battle was now over. The moment when I would conquer the dungeon was approaching. Chapter 76. Qualification 1. Qualification 1. Killing over 600 humans in that battle had resulted in quite a bit of a gain for me. First of all, my level had risen almost disgustingly so, up to level 199. Even if the experience was less on average than that of the higher-level monsters that appeared on the 7th floor, the humans had grouped up all at once instead of making me hunt them down individually. The conditions needed for me to evolve included leveling up, and now I only needed one more level to satisfy that condition. Second, I obtained a lot of money. Plenty of those humans here had hundreds, if not tens of thousands of gold on them. Checking my inventory, I had over 400,000 gold now. Since I had been spending a lot of my money on the entrance fee to the Garden of Nak, it felt quite nice to have a surplus of cash. The last thing was the items I acquired. I had been using Lunatic Trickster pretty heavily in that battle, so most of the items had been used to fuel it. Still, I kept the high-end equipment and really useful potions. Compared to the armor and weapon I was currently using, their performance wasn't all that great, but I could still use them as materials to synthesize equipment in the future. Are you heading back to the 7th floor, Captain? No, before that I have some other things to take care of. I'll go conquer the 7th floor after that. I responded to Li Chanyu as I organized my inventory. My thoughts drifted to Jinma's tower and its manager, A. I had been thinking of conquering the 7th floor of the Black Palace and conquering Jinma's tower, but A had told me to find myself first before I entered the boss room. Is the 7th floor the end of the dungeon? I believe so. If not, I'll just have to keep pushing forward. What will you do after you reach the end of this dungeon? His question gave me pause. Don't worry about it too much. I'm simply curious about what will happen next. I think I'll just go outside and buy some jajangmyeon. Really? That's it. I'm kidding. I smiled grimly at Li Chanyu. I suppose I'll have to go find my family. These other humans don't matter, heck. Sometimes it feels weird to think that I was once human too. But still, it's not possible for me to ignore my family. Even if they died, I still want to know. Captain, that's... Li Chanyu hesitated, then let out a sigh. I've told you this before, but the world is a little crazy right now. Years have passed since I first entered this dungeon, so it might have gotten worse, but I doubt it's gotten better. For low-level non-combatants, well, things usually don't go well for them. You mean I should be prepared for the worst? Yes. His expression was quite dark, but I decided it would be best to leave the topic alone. He was right, after all. More than a year had passed already. It was silly to expect that my parents or siblings would still live, that I could find them, and they would greet me with a smile. Besides, haven't I been focused on just my own survival up until now? How hypocritical of me. It was cruel of me to start caring about them now, just because I was nearing the end of this dungeon. What's next? Li Chanyu was attempting to change the topic. Let's go take a walk. Through the dungeon? Yeah, it would be nice if we could live comfortably here, without all these people trying to take us on. I suppose I'll have to aim at becoming so strong that they won't even bother. Lee Chanyu laughed at me, finding my goal amusing. What a captain-like goal. Wouldn't it be nice if we also made a guild? That's a good idea. We passed the time walking to the 6th floor with idle talk. Until you clear the 7th floor, I will focus on beating the boss here. I believe that you can. But after the aftermath of today, stronger enemies might show up to investigate. If you're going to take on this floor's boss, you may want to hurry. I want to, but it makes such a terrible sound. I bid farewell to Lee Chanyu and made my way back to the 7th floor, killing all the monsters I encountered on the way. The 7th floor corridors were made of a translucent obsidian-like crystal, flickering as if it was breathing any time I released my mana. It was an incredibly beautiful place, and it seemed ironic to me that dangerous monsters could live here. I made my way to the boss room, marked by a bizarre iron gate built into the middle of a cave wall covered in the same material as the corridors. It was a massive door, larger than any I had ever seen, and it lacked a keyhole unlike the other ones in the dungeon. It welcomed any and all challengers to enter. I had a feeling of what lurked within, remembering the words the humans said before. The owner of the dungeon. That's what would appear if I went past that door. Even reaching out with my senses, I couldn't feel anything in the room beyond it. Not that I was surprised. I hadn't expected it to be so easy to gather information on the boss. I would have to fight him sooner or later if I wanted to leave this dungeon, so no point in rushing it anyway. You are unbearably kind. A's words rang out in my head as I decided to ignore the boss door for now and instead open the path to Jinma's tower. I stepped into the tower, greeted only by a vast expanse of earth. Ha! Welcome to the 6th floor of the Jinma's tower. There is no opponent this time. A? I looked around but couldn't find him. I could feel his presence, although I wasn't able to pinpoint where he was. But more importantly than that, is this really the tower? It's huge. You will conquer this floor by acquiring the wings of Jinma. It had thrown me into the 6th floor challenge without any warning or preparation. The Colosseum did not rise from the ground as it usually did, but I could still tell there had been a chance as soon as he finished talking. The quality of the mana flowing through the air had changed, and I tensed up. Acquire the wings of Jinma? I grounded my teeth as I looked around but couldn't see anything. Wait, no opponents? How can I not have an opponent here? I could hear a rush of air, and without thinking, I used Ubiquitous to leap into the air. Seconds later, shells of dark mana slammed into the ground where I had been, exploding below me. If I had been hit by one of those directly, I thought you said there was no opponent. There are obstacles. It is the will of Jinma's tower to use its energy to protect the wings from you. Fate. Took me a second to parse through what he was saying. The energy of the tower? Then that means the entirety of this place is now my enemy. The mana shells volleyed forth once more. They were orbs of mana, shaped sort of like cannonballs, armed with murderous intent. The mana of the tower was thick and pure, completely different from that which was flowing through my body. The ordeal I was currently in was absurd, and I had to wonder if the 6th floor was also the last of Jinma's tower. However, I didn't have long to consider this as mana shells rained down upon me from all directions. I wouldn't have the time to sit and think in this place. If I paused to think, if I hesitated at all, this mana bombardment would destroy me. The wings of Jinma, that was all I needed to worry about right now. I had to find them. If I couldn't before my mana ran out, I would die. This was a space where I didn't have to worry about death sticking, but it was possible the location of the wings would change if I lost. This floor was a trial designed to test my control over my body and my ability to use my senses to evade attacks. Right now, however, it seemed impossible. The wings had to be somewhere in this vast space, but trying to find them while avoiding this continual bombardment of mana as it rained down from everywhere, and then to secure the wings and bring them back? Is that even possible? The core of the previous trials the tower presented to me was to overcome them using predation. I grew in my usage of predation every time I trained here. I had learned of new things that were possible with the skill. Is it telling me to devour this mana with my predation? That's absurd, The mana of this tower possessed an intense will similar but distinct to my own. If I tried to touch it, it would violently reject my own will and destroy me. It made no sense to devour the mana. If I could do that, I wouldn't need to fear the use of any magic. Even if it were possible, it would be at a much different level than that of devouring the body or even the soul and converting it into mana. But I had to regardless. This wouldn't be the first time I misunderstood what I was to do in Jinma's tower, that I had learned how to accomplish something I had thought was impossible. If I couldn't conquer this task, I would never be able to conquer this tower. If you don't keep moving, you'll get hurt. I ignored A's words as I always did and continued to stand still. Hundreds of mana shells volleyed toward me, unmatched violence raining down upon my body. I couldn't have prepared for the sensation that overtook me, overwhelmed by fear as everything that made me who I am shattered. Even though I knew I wouldn't die here, I couldn't help but be afraid. Mostly, I was terrified of this pain. But Jinma's tower always presented me with what I needed. Seconds after my body was obliterated, it reformed in the same place. I opened my eyes, and the mana shells once again volleyed toward me. I have to do this. I can do this. With a sigh in my heart, I spread my arms wide open and welcomed my second death. As pain permeated every fiber of my being, I could feel strange mana that I was starting to get a little used to. Chapter 77. Qualification 2. Qualification 2. Wouldn't it be nice if I could just devour all the mana in the world? I could just eat everything that's annoying. If I were able to do that, nothing would be left to stand in my way. But the reality wasn't that simple. A price had to be paid for all things. In order to grow stronger and make these powers mine, I still had to pay the price. I still had to be dominant and take what I wanted. Predation often made the process a lot easier, but it couldn't fundamentally change it. It wasn't like I could predate upon a living enemy unless I overpowered them first, and even when devouring the corrupted undead souls, I couldn't just bite into them. That same logic applied here as well, to the energy of Jinma's tower. These shells of pure mana had a completely different form from what I was able to devour so far. But what if I acted as if it could be predated? If I could break the mana's will, overwhelm its aggression, quickly? It wouldn't be easy. I had no idea what I should do. One more death claimed me. This experience reminded me of when I challenged the first floor of the tower. Is this even possible for me now, in this body? No. I have to do it. If I couldn't, I would never conquer the dungeon. And if I couldn't conquer the dungeon, I would never be able to go outside. A few more deaths claimed me as I considered these things. The location of the wings of Jinma was no closer to me than when I started. My sensing skills had reached the higher levels and continued to grow, allowing me to grasp everything within a few kilometers around myself. Even if the wings were a bit outside that range, I should be able to get a rough sense of where they were. But nothing came to me. I couldn't sense them at all. Are the wings of a similar material as the mana of the tower? I desperately tried to increase the detection range, but all I could feel was the seemingly infinite mana trying to kill me, pure and dark as it volleyed through the air. I had to figure out a way to deal with this mana. The search could wait. I had to prove my superiority to this mana that made up Jinma's tower, to subdue its will and make it my own. But how? I could tell that the mana here was stronger than any I had experienced before. It was engraved into my bones now after demolishing my body several times already. Even after the tower reconstructed me, I couldn't shake the feeling of the mana tearing me apart. Nor could I help but notice the difference between myself and the power of the tower. But is the purpose of this floor really to help my predation grow? The thought suddenly occurred to me. Only one thing was certain. The mana of Jinma's tower shouldn't pose an issue to me by the time I cleared this floor. It wouldn't be possible to obtain the wings with the mana raining down on me anyway. I thought the way to go about this was to devour the mana with predation, much like I had been ingesting bodies with the energy of life and the energy of death. I had even been able to devour the soul as well and learned how to deal with its power. Once I had learned how to do it, it wasn't so hard. The trick was to keep pushing forward even when I didn't know what to do. But this time, the mana of Jinma's tower was overwhelmingly stronger than my own, darker and purer than mine. If I entered a battle of strength with the mana of the tower, rather than management of mana using skill, I couldn't win. Mana? Mana was everywhere, but I couldn't eat it. Maybe I was mistaken at a fundamental level about what I needed to achieve here. The tower wasn't presenting me with the grandiose goal of devouring all mana, just to eat this tower's mana. It was a level of challenge that made more sense to me, one I could wrap my mind around. I hadn't tried it before, but I couldn't back down now. I was filled with anticipation. Why hadn't I thought of this before? Well, I suppose I had been relying on my skills up until now, ever since I became a goblin. I've evolved several times, developing various skills such as predation, and yet I hadn't noticed the energy inside me that I was capable of controlling. So it should be possible right here and now in this space filled with pure mana. I closed my eyes and focused on the mana flowing throughout my body, pumping through my ebon heart. I was already too familiar with the sensation of it, so it was easy for me to grasp onto. At the same time, I could feel the mana from the tower, flying through the air all around me. I began to analyze it as it collided with my body, destroying me once more. As I suspected, it was oddly similar to the mana in my own body. I attempted to alter the mana that was flowing through me. The mana each being is born with is unique, and it changes as one grows. Being a goblin, a hobgoblin, a bugbear, and now a crimson elf. Each time I evolved, my mana changed with me. Can I control how it changes, though? I would need to if I wanted to reach the same level of mana that the tower possessed. Mana should still be mana no matter the size or strength of it, right? Shortly after my body was reconstructed, I could feel the waves of mana rushing once more. Even without any specific form for it to take, it had enough power to tear right through me. It was violence in its purest form. Why isn't it taking a form? It could be flame or ice, lightning or wind. Why pure mana? It occurred to me that perhaps the purpose behind it was to familiarize me with it, that the oversaturation of mana within the air wasn't an attack. It made no sense for the tower to use its energy to kill me and then have that same energy reconstruct my body. I felt like I was seeing clearly now. The veil lifted from over my eyes. The ebon heart was pounding in my chest, trying to tell me something. When did I start thinking of my heart as something separate from myself? Had it been when I first recognized its existence in its pitch-black form? Or when it saved me before? It was silly to consider it as a separate entity. My heart was my heart, and it didn't matter if there was something in there I didn't know about. It was the organ at the center of my body, creating the mana that flowed through me like blood. It would cower in fear, lying to me by saying certain things weren't possible. But when I thought about it, it wasn't like I had the ability to directly control everything happening in my body anyway. My lungs, my stomach, I didn't have individual control over those things. I, like all humans, had to rely on unconscious processes to run that stuff. Wasn't this pitch-black heart of mine just the same? I couldn't control it or grasp all of its behavior, but that was natural. It was just a heart that was a bit different than the one I had as a human, one that knew how to create stronger mana. Still, something about it confused me. When I claimed that the heart had been pushing me forward, was that all just for show? Was there no actual will in it? Since then, I had calmed down a bit and I figured out my goals since then, but something still felt odd. Why did my skills of lightning magic and escape disappear to be replaced by black lightning? My heart was circulating mana throughout my blood as it was supposed to, but it felt like it was trying to get my attention. When was the last time my heart moved according to my own will? The black lightning had been a powerful skill for me to acquire, but I always thought it a coincidence that I did. But what if it wasn't? What if I instinctively pushed my heart to move forward, to grow stronger? The thoughts spread through my mind, gripping onto me and refusing to let go. I had to stop thinking of this as a battle against another being inside of me who had its own will. A memory of when I was able to feel this dark heart, the strongest, flashed through my mind, its strange beat pulsing through me. The mana that had been flowing through my body up until now was gradually absorbed into my heart. My body gradually lost function as mana flowed out of it, soon to be destroyed by the mana of the tower. My arms, legs, torso, and head, All were destroyed. All but a pitch-black heart that continued to pulse. I could feel my soul and flesh unified now. I could tell that I had control over the beat of my own heart, and it would move according to my will. The mana flowing in from all directions couldn't destroy the pitch-black heart. The heart merely accepted it into itself and began to change in the way I wanted it. This was the purpose of Jinma's tower from the very beginning. To change the mana flowing through me and this heart of mine. To qualify me as Jinma. To awaken the wings of Jinma. The shape of the heart changed to that of Jinma, beating more vigorously as it did, and began to produce mana like that of the tower. From there, a body gradually formed around it. It wasn't different from the body I had, but I could tell it was full of mana from the tower. Wings of pure mana began to sprout out from my shoulders. This is a little embarrassing, and as such, I had succeeded in overcoming the challenges of the 6th floor of Jinma's tower and acquired the wings of Jinma. But I had to wonder, at what cost? Chapter 78. Qualification 3. Qualification 3. As I came to realize the truth of this floor, and the pure, dark mana began to radiate out from my heart, the attacks from the tower subsided. I wasn't satisfied with just that, however. I flapped my new wings, still weak and new to me, and began to pour my power of predation into them to devour the rest of Jinma's mana that was left in this place. Unlike the mana that was out in the world, the mana here in the tower was concentrated. It felt like it had been made just for me, and it helped me reach a new sense of understanding. Magic has increased by 217. In discarding all my mana and forging new mana from my heart, I sacrificed roughly 500 of my magic power levels. Even though the amount was less, however, I could tell it was of much higher quality. And, thanks to the mana I absorbed from this place, I was able to recover about half of the magic I lost. Now I could produce a much stronger effect with the same amount I had been using before. You have conquered the 6th floor of Jinma's tower. You have acquired one of the qualifications needed to unseal the castle. I was no longer standing in this space dense with mana, enjoying the wide expanse of the area around me. Will I ever come back here? I muttered to no one in particular, looking around the tower. Technically speaking, no. It appeared next to me, responding to me. I wanted to ask what he meant, but he regarded my new black wings with a stern expression. You are qualified, Fate. But I'm not ready quite yet. I retorted, controlling the mana inside my body to retract the wings back inside me. The mana that had been forming the wings flowed back without any resistance. I hadn't completed this challenge just to get the wings. It was just that like a human had arms and legs or a tiger had a tail, anyone who handled the mana of Jinma had them. The only difference was that since they were made of mana, I could retract them at will. The wings are a tool developed to control the amount of power you release and place your mana outside of your body. It is impossible to generate power without them, however. But if I keep my wings out, I'll be discovered as a Jinma. I've already heard from Rain that they aren't the type to be welcomed by other beings. You haven't even reached the end of the path of a Jinma yet. Just as I finished my work here, I already felt the urge to go back and finish the rest of the process. I smiled at A and decided to leave Jinma's tower. It occurred to me that I forgot to ask what he meant by saying, technically speaking, as I entered the garden of Nak. I suppose it didn't matter. I broke through Jinma's tower. Now it would be best to finish the 5th game of the Garden of Nak before I went to challenge the dungeon. Elle was sitting at the table as she always did since the first game, lifting her eyes to greet me as she noticed my appearance. You've changed. I looked down at myself at her words, noticing the change in my mana had brought a much larger change to my soul than my body. My skin and hair had grown lighter, but the details of the shape of my soul were different as well. I suppose that was natural once I considered it. After all, wasn't it mana that bound the soul to the body? The body produces and manages the mana, but it is the soul that holds it. When the mana changes, so too would the soul. I felt a bit foolish that I hadn't realized it sooner. I'm here to finish our game. You're feeling confident today. Elle's smile deepened. Her voice relaxed as she spoke. You haven't been through the 5th game, but if you're stubborn you'll never leave here. We'll see. I laughed grimly, laying my hand on the table to signify I was ready to start. Very well. The heartwarming smile that had been filling her face vanished in a second. Her cheeks swelling up slightly now as if she were upset by my attitude. She waved her hands over the table gradually stretching and widening as it followed the movements of her hands. On top of it, the castle and walls that I made previously began to form. Let us start. The Garden of Pleasure, the fifth and final game. It focused on filling out the gaps in the castle walls, securing their defenses. I would put together the small models and she would break them down. If I could overcome her interference and finish my work within the time limit, it would be my victory. Can't keep up. I had already blown through thousands of gold playing this game, but now on the fifth game, she began to show off her skills. Her power fascinated me even though I recognized how deadly it could be. You've let another one collapse. Elle was wearing a dress that exposed quite a bit, deliberately exposing more as she moved. She was trying to seduce me with her unique power, fascination, which couldn't be called magic. It's not possible for you yet. I was hoping that it might be, but this is a bit disappointing. It really was pathetic, but I couldn't help but look at her. I knew that if I were deprived of her attention, I would lose it. It felt rude not to look at her as if slandering her beauty. Even though I had resistances to the highest level, I still couldn't control myself against her. The time I spent training since I awoke as a goblin didn't matter. It wasn't even a matter of will. She stimulated the instincts that lay deep within everyone, contained at the base of one's soul, and forced them to come forward. It couldn't be prevented with a skill, nor resistances to abnormal statuses. All that awaited me here was defeat. As I progressed through the fifth game again, I realized aberration tolerance wasn't enough, but it could help a bit. Now I know. The moment I gained Jinma's mana, I felt like I had grabbed onto the edge of a power beyond the realm of her skills. I was able to feel my strength all the better after I emptied myself completely, the power of the mana that filled my soul and forged a new one. This power, a more powerful force than any I've encountered before. It was too obvious. To overcome her power, I also had to have something outside of the realm of skill. For me, that was predation. I wouldn't be able to eat her power, it was beyond me, but I could pick the ones I could eat out of the parts that made up her abilities. There's one. It had been impossible before, but now? Her expression, previously one of ease, collapsed slightly for the first time. I had successfully broken through her balance of power, and I enjoyed the sight of her frustration as she ground her teeth. My work was done on the windows, roof, walls, and gate of the castle. I controlled the blocks and stacked them easily with my mana, moving them through the optimal route I had envisioned. No, not enough yet. That's enough. It felt like I was cheating to interfere with her movements, but I laughed it off as I finished my work elsewhere and avoided her hand. Her fascination erupted strongly for a moment, but I was able to cover myself with the energy of my predation, the power of it rising up to cover my soul in its entirety to eat her attack. It wasn't quite like mana or even devouring the energies of life and death, but it felt similar. It felt like it was energy related to Jinma, which meant it would be possible to eat with predation now. This skill, her interference in my building, was gradually slowing as my pace only grew. The castle gates were complete now, as well as the wall and the windows. Even the tiles of floors were done, and her frustration grew in measure with how much she was now puffing out her cheeks. It's too fast. I should have realized this when I earned the mana of Jinma. It wasn't as easy as it might have seemed. It was hard to pick out the mana of Jinma amongst her various powers. Nor was it easy to actually eat it once I found it. The process wasn't perfect, and it wasn't possible to absorb abilities, but still I was devouring what I could to give myself strength. I was starting to overpower my opponent now, using all the energy I could to manage my sensing and movement skills. As she attempted to read my movements, she was able to catch the moment she had lost. In a final attempt, Elle grabbed my wrist to try and stop me as I finished the top of the last spire. You have won the fifth game of the Garden of Nak. You have acquired one of the qualifications needed to unseal the castle. Her foul expression confirmed my victory, but she surprised me by releasing my wrist and shaking my hand. The last part one had placed rotated around in the air, changing in color and light as it moved to the top floor to finish the final decoration. Why? The voice left me for a reason I didn't know. It's your victory. Elle ignored my question, responding angrily. This is it. You just don't know yet. I examined the completed castle. It was just a toy, but it looked rather realistic and even a bit magnificent, the practical product of meticulous design. I wouldn't have minded living in such a place myself. But what does it mean? There was no doubt some hidden meaning to this game that I didn't know yet, and it would most likely impact me in the future. Perhaps this toy castle had some sort of connection to the castle I was attempting to unseal? I didn't know, and I didn't want to ask Elle out of fear of the answer. I was becoming quite used to their secrecy nowadays anyway. It's all over now. Go away. All right. Despite my agreement, she immediately rose out of her seat to stop me from leaving, her expression angry. I briefly felt that she was making herself a bit of a nuisance as I sat back down. Elle was still regarding me with a harsh look. I have a little time left. Can I stay here for a bit? Oh, just for a little bit. Are you busy? Her expression relaxed a bit as she asked me this. Well, if I evolve, I may not be able to return to the rookie's battlefield, and I need to organize some stuff there before that happens. There is also... Get out. What? Wait a second. Fool. I was instantly kicked out of the Garden of Nak, unsure of what just happened. I shook it off quickly, turning my mind to the rookie's battlefield. I had to consider when I would enter there next. Chapter 79. Qualification 4. Qualification 4. A couple of huge events had taken place during the early stages of the Great Fusion. During that time, the elves had not yet been able to adapt to their new environment, and none of them could even consider the idea that a monster born from the transformation of a human soul could worm its way into their haven. Because they couldn't prepare for it, the devastation that happened, as a result, was terrible. The most important thing that had happened, however, was not that elves were killed. It was that there were monsters who were able to take over their bodies after destroying their souls. It was only natural. Their abilities were optimized to kill the soul but leave the flesh intact. It would be weird if no elf had their body stolen. The problem was that once the body of an elf was taken over, it became hard to tell them apart from other elves. As time passed, the monsters continued to mutate, slowly losing their memories of when they were human and, eventually, losing their ability to find their partner. But what about the monsters that had succeeded before that had happened? Elves prided themselves in the purity and nobility of their soul and rejected those who could not keep their souls pure. They couldn't admit that human souls had been able to overtake the body of an elf. So doubt had been born. I could believe anyone who hadn't been with me from the start on the battlefield. Before I went and said it would be nice to meet the other elves, I had to be sure of their identity first. No one could be convinced that the person wearing the face of an elf was truly one. The elves created this world to protect themselves and, at the same time, become their own worst enemy. No longer could they stand united. There was no need to protect myself from them. These scattered elves bound to this battlefield could not be my enemies. The issue was those who were exempt from it. This gave me pause, as I had been only considering the rookie's battlefield as a new place to train. I've never seen the Knights of Elicatra before, Mirena said as she peeled an orange-colored fruit. It was shaped like a triangle and only grew in the elven forests. They have a huge fortress here in the battlefield, right? That's right. I was playing dumb, and that seemed to be enough to convince Mirena. She didn't doubt me at all. Her sincerity so pure I had to wonder how she survived for so long. Or at least there was one. I wondered at the time why that built it. I wonder if they were expecting an attack. If they did, it would have been nice if they told the rest of us. I think that if they warned everyone, they would have panicked and flocked to them. That might have interfered with their own survival. That's not fair, we're all the same kind, right? If everyone were nice like you, we could all join forces to defeat the monsters. I chose not to answer her, instead munching on the fruit she had given me as I thought. I thought about those who had perspectives different than that, and those who were high-ranking amongst the elves. How they prepared as if they knew an attack would happen here. It had been some time since I entered the rookie's battlefield, but I couldn't be sure how long. I remembered what Rain told me about the ones who were called natives by human society. Those who brutally murdered the ones who escaped from the elves of the past and had angered the fallen. They reminded me of the Knights of Elicatra, those who had sworn to protect their own people and yet left them to be killed and scattered. It's a bit scary. Do we have to talk about it? No, I smiled bitterly and shook my head. If I had more time, I would have liked to investigate them further, but it was only recently that I learned of the Knights of Elicatra. I was close to evolving again, too. It would be wiser for me to be content with what I knew and withdraw for now. I didn't want to risk announcing my presence to these irregulars. After all, a surprise attack would be most effective if I knew of the enemy, and they didn't know of me. Is it today? It appears to be starting. A wind of disaster that would never stop until elves and monsters alike were wiped out tickled my hair. I had gotten used to it, but I still couldn't help but feel a little nervous. I couldn't let myself be driven by that feeling, however. This was the moment when the monsters who strived to destroy the elves' souls would fuse together with the purpose of destroying all things they encountered. Although I didn't feel threatened by them, no matter how much they might fuse, I couldn't help but feel a bit disgusted by them. It doesn't seem like there are any monsters around. Be careful, we don't know when that'll change, Mirena said as she grabbed onto my clothing. I smiled bitterly at her and expanded the range of my detection outward. Her attitude was a bit pitiful, but she wasn't wrong. When the wind of Utinus began to blow through, nothing was certain. I wouldn't have been surprised if a monster had formed right above my head. But it wasn't a monster that today's wind had summoned. It happened in an instant, something strange within my field of detection. Who are you two? An elf appeared out of thin air in front of us. A beautiful woman dressed in pure white cloth and wearing a red muffler. I had encountered several elves since I had been visiting the rookie's battlefield, but this one felt different. The other ones I met felt insecure. They couldn't trust us and we couldn't trust them. But this one felt more solid, confident. She exuded strength, and I was convinced she had to be one of the Knights of Elicatra. Mirena stood next to me, trembling, unable to respond. It's nice to meet another one of our kind. Our kind? I don't consider myself the same as you. She frowned, lifting her sword to point it right at me. For me, kin refers to Elnim, leader of Elicatra, and my comrades. I couldn't help but wonder why a member of the Knights of Elicatra was appearing in front of us here, freely identifying herself. I had too many questions to even begin. Well, did you kill the monsters around here? I have heard that they have been a problem lately. She exuded confidence. But I have no need to explain our plans to you. If something gets in our way, we will remove it. That is all. Even one of your own kind? You are not one of my kind. At that moment I was everywhere, using ubiquitous to jump around. She readied her sword and her mana, aiming for when I would reappear near her. Blood splashed through the air. Black smoke snapped at her left arm, trying to bite into it. She resisted it, fighting against my mana, but it wouldn't be enough to stop my power of predation if I could wrest control from her. Her magic was increasing rapidly, the taste of her arm bitter and unappetizing. I was shocked by how strong she seemed to be, but equally excited at how strong I could become by devouring her. You! She pushed her body away from me, shouting, "You were going to try and kill us, weren't you?" I floated around her, extinguishing the magic she tried to shoot at me. "Run away before you get caught in this, Mirena." But I didn't have time to listen to her response, a rapier flashing out toward my neck at incredible speed. I couldn't properly block it but was able to deflect its course at the last second. "Get off my arm." I ignored her as I increased the mana in the smoke that was attached to her left arm, pulling at it roughly. She gritted her teeth as she tried to break free from it, unable to stop me from breaking it. It was too tough for me to get through, but I could at least disable it for now. "I can't use my communication magic. Were you trying to kill us?" My attention was drawn away from her, unable to ignore the wind of Utinus now. The wind that broke the will of a monster and made it do strange things. Who made it? Mirena, Run away. I can't. I ground my teeth, noticing the distorted smile of this woman who was standing against me. Come now. Can't you save this lovey-dovey business until later? Her rapier flashed out again, shots of magic energy flying out with it. I struggled to stop the attack with my own sword, wondering if I could keep this up and protect Mirena. I continued to search this opponent for some sort of gap in her defenses as our swords collided, raising my detection to the max. It was hard to get a read on her, however, and her combat skills were equally matched with my own. There were no visible gaps in her defense, and each attack was heavy-hitting. I wouldn't be able to keep this up. Only, should I run? No, I didn't even know if I could escape, much less Mirena. I didn't really like the idea of protecting her, but she wasn't the type to give up and run away just because it was hard. Why should I be? And more than that, the gaze of this woman before us, looking at us as if we weren't even living creatures in her estimation, annoyed me. What do you want? I have nothing to tell you. A huge coffin of ice slammed into me, coming into contact with the flames I barely raised in time. Hot and cold collided, water vapor billowing out. Through the mist of vapor, her rapier flew out once more, blocked by my great sword. I needed to figure out a way to force through an opponent with such complete defenses, to change this situation entirely. There was a way, the idea exploding into my mind suddenly. I opened my mouth, activating a familiar skill. Kai-a-wea, a strange sound emitted from my throat, one that not even monsters could produce with their vocal cords. Just listening to it disturbed the balance of one's body and damaged the mind. It was disastrous for those who couldn't avoid or resist it. Madness noise could only mean one thing here. You! I smiled at her as I hurled forward with the greatsword, capitalizing on her confusion. I created several traps in the air with Lunatic Trickster, blocking her magic attacks with explosions. Oh! Monsters were beginning to flock toward us, a large amount proportional to the sound of my madness noise. Chapter 80, Qualification 5. Qualification 5. It's not enough yet? I continued to let out the loud screech of my madness noise as I counted the number of monsters approaching, expanding out my detection range. My skill had grown by the day as I ate the monsters here on the rookie's battlefield, and now it was at the end of the advanced level. Ah! This terrible screaming. I was losing control of the mana the elf woman sent to attack me, twisting my body to try and avoid it and grinding my teeth. I had to keep this skill up. Madness noise was the only advantage I had over her that she couldn't stop. I was surprised that she had fallen already, given the difficult nature of training one's resistance to abnormal statuses. Since I had reached the highest level of resistance, I had no issue in letting out this horrible sound. The real issue was Mirena, who had passed out on the spot behind me. I knew that the blow from the noise would be too much for her to withstand. Aren't you two supposed to be allies? There is nothing more precious to me than my own life. Even though I had said it, the idea of Mirena dying here left an unpleasant taste in my mouth. I went ahead and used some of my mana to place traps below Mirena. The ground fell out from underneath her, but she landed softly on a mat I placed with the trap instead of deadly spears. I fortified the entrance with Lunatic Trickster, ensuring that she would be safe during this battle. Its ability to manipulate and instantly create traps was useful for things like this. The loss of material wasn't great, but it would be enough to keep her safe, at least. Meanwhile, the woman before me once again attempted to use her communication magic, finding it still blocked off by me. You're not a rookie. Something's not quite right. By the way, it seems that none of your colleagues are coming. Did you have a backup plan? Ugh! I don't need reinforcements against you. She shouted back at me, her expression hardening. I kept my attention on her mana, monitoring when she might try to use her communication magic again. There had been 2 reasons why I had summoned the monsters here, and that had been one of them. In case reinforcements from the Knights of Elikatra came, it would be nice to have them here to slow them down. I didn't have to worry too much about that now, blocking her line of communication as I was, but it was better to be on the safe side of things. This woman was able to identify where we were from a long distance away and had shown up suddenly, I could only assume the other knights had equally impressive abilities. Even if the monsters weren't all that effective against them, I could use them to fuel myself if it came down to it, since they posed no issue to my predation skill. The second was to kill as many monsters as possible before I left the rookie's battlefield. They were great sacrifices to grow my own skill. I still had no way of figuring out what the Knights of Elicatra wanted, however, or what resources they had. All I knew was that by killing large swathes of monsters, I had somehow disrupted their plans in the first place. Oh, if that were the case, I would kill everything I could before I left. Are you insane? Now you can't even run away. I don't intend to run. I have never been the type to run away from a battle. Why would I start now? Especially since I realized that this heart had completely become a part of myself. That experience had made me realize my own obsession with fighting and growing stronger. I had no intention of trying to change that. I let my demon's claws flow from both of my shoulders like huge wings. Now, the skill was at an advanced level. I won't let you run either. Do you think I fear you? She talked big, but I could tell her words didn't match her actions or thoughts. I couldn't believe a single thing she said. If she thought she could keep a handle on the situation, she wouldn't have tried to call for reinforcements. I had to expect that she would try to find a chance to escape now that it failed. I could interfere with her magic, though, so I wouldn't let her. The monsters launched their attacks at us, having completed several fusions by the time they reached us. Many of them were already level 160 or higher, powerful creatures drawn to us by the sound of my madness noise. Oh ahea! Let's get started. These monsters! She attempted to use her communication magic again, but I had been waiting for it. I once more used my power of predation, combined with the energy of Jinma, to reach out and stop it. If I could keep her reinforcements from arriving, then all I had to do was stop her. Her expression became grim, as if she had been reading my thoughts. Something this inferior. I blocked her sword attack that had shot out like lightning but was almost hit by her follow-up kick. A monster with twisted wings fell on us from above, preventing her from hitting me. I moved behind her with Ubiquitous, swinging my sword at her back. She was more focused on the monster than me at that moment. Where? The monster was deflected off of her shield, but she was unable to stop my sword from tearing into her shoulder, although the wound wasn't as deep as I would have liked. Even though her body was so light, all of her stats were astonishingly high. Felt a bit outrageous. Oh! Tendrils from the various monsters around us reached out to entangle us. The woman desperately defended herself, focusing on the tendrils rather than my own attacks. I spread my demon's claws out wide, piercing through the bodies of the monsters around me and devouring them. You have gained 1,537,950 experience. You have received 9 gold. These monsters' very existence was a double-edged sword. Their soul-based attacks were undoubtedly fatal, but if they were attacked in the same way, they couldn't withstand it. In order for them to defeat me, they had to hit me with a strong attack that I couldn't stop. Oh! Key! No, not enough. The monsters seemed to have reached that same conclusion, focusing their attacks on the knight instead of me. The monsters further away from us continued to merge together, growing stronger. I still stopped to let off more madness noise when I could, calling more and more monsters to gather here. Some of the ones arriving looked like they might have fused more than 5 times, even. Crazy. You're too crazy to be a rookie. Well, kind of. I partially agreed with her, once again blocking her attempts to communicate. She jumped over the monsters towards me, soaring through the air. Shit! I sensed the attack, instinctively raising my sword up to block it. My flames and black lighting spewed out, slamming against her ice magic. Her ice was somehow stronger than my flame magic that had reached the highest level, blowing past it. I quickly readjusted the trajectory of my blade, blocking the ice. Freeze! Had I been a second later, no doubt my sword arm would have been frozen completed through. But I wasn't safe yet. Blocking the ice caused me to lose my center in gravity. I jumped with Ubiquitous before I collided with the ground, landing safely in the midst of the monsters. The monsters around me soared into the air, and I couldn't help but think of how fun this was turning out to be. That elf is strong. That woman. I remember them. The monsters around me continued to focus on her, eager to devour this strong elf's soul and take over their flesh. It was a spectacular sight to behold. Ha! She activated her defensive magic against the monsters, a huge tornado of freezing air forming from the mana that now overflowed from her body. Most of the monsters around her were caught up in it, fusing in midair as her mana attacked them. The monsters won out, however, changing and evolving before they could be ripped apart. This had been exactly what I wanted to see. The evolution brought about as the wind of Uranus compelled these monsters to fuse endlessly. I could kill them. I wanted to devour them. The elf attempted her magic again, exhibiting astonishing control of her mana as she combined her communication magic with her attack and defense magic. It had been hard enough for me to block just the communication magic that she had been skillfully triggering in between attacks. But this was absurd. Yet, this impressive display would prove to be fatal. She was distracted by her intense focus on managing so many magics at once, unable to stop me as I rushed forward. This is the power of those who are named Rookie. Allow me to show you. Try it. I used Ubiquitous to close the distance between us, surrounding my body in a shield of Jinma's mana to block her sword thrust. The giant monster that had just finished fusion above us began to fall to the ground. I am a proud Elicatra knight. I will never kneel to the likes of you. Ah! The monster landed behind her, reaching over and biting through her neck with its massive jaws as I distracted her. The mana flowing from her immediately shut off. Ko-ha-ho-ho! The monster raised its head and let out a triumphant roar, the other monsters in the battlefield flocking toward it as if they were cheering. The body of the elf who had lost her head collapsed to the ground, gently consumed by my black smoke. Everything's going as planned. Now all I have to do is enjoy this buffet prepared for me. Only one elf is left. Wonderful. Devour him too. There's strange energy coming from him. Can I eat it? I double-checked the time I had left until I would leave the rookie's battlefield, satisfied with what I found. I will enjoy this meal. We've reached the end of today's episode. Thank you for traversing the boundless landscapes of fantasy with us. If today's story has sparked joy within you, please remember to hit the like button, share our journey with others, and subscribe to Lord of the Stories for an ever-expanding collection of mystical escapades. Until we meet again to turn the page to a new adventure, hold the tales dear in your heart and let the embers of magic warmly glow in your spirit. Farewell, intrepid explorers of the narrative unknown.